Hello and welcome back to another episode of They Don't Teach This in Law School. I'm your host, Charley Mann of law firm Alchemy, and from my hotel room in Florida right before Jay Berkowitz's 10 Golden Rules live event, I'm going to answer the age-old question, what's the one thing they don't teach you in law school? So in this case, the one thing they don't teach you in law school is the value of communicating with people who are actually in the know, the people who may actually know something, who oftentimes are not the people at the top level. So earlier today, as I'm recording this, I had a delay on my flight out of Dulles. Now, apparently this is something that regularly happens. Flying into Palm Beach, there can be delays due to air traffic controllers essentially throttling some of the traffic through the area for safety reasons. It may also have to do with presidential travel as well, but they're not going to tell us those exact details. So what happened is all the passengers were all at the gate. We all look at our phones at the same time after we've overheard the announcement that, the flight's going to be backed up. We may not be taking off until 12 o'clock. Well, this was a 9 a.m. flight that we were supposed to go on. So that obviously is not really fun news. At that point, I'm looking at potentially rebooking the flight. I can get something later that day that might fly into Fort Lauderdale and is less likely to have some perturbances in that. Ultimately, I decided to stick it out, and for very much one specific reason. When this sort of thing happens, we get the notices from the apps, we get the text messages from the airline, but nothing beats walking up to the gate agent and actually asking that person what is going on, and asking them in such a way where it's almost like you're sidling up and saying, give me the real scoop here. I'm not up there to complain. The gate agent can't change when the flight is going to take off. However, if I am nice and if I engage in a little bit of conversation, I can get more information. So the information that I got from her, because I also wanted to know, should I go wandering around the airport, just go for a walk, whatever it might be, was that the pilot said we're pretty likely to get out of there no later than 11:30, which was great to know. It was great to know that the pilot had a timeline on which he was operating. This is the type of information that you only find really from the ground crew. This is going into someone's law firm and asking the paralegals what's going on, rather than asking you, the law firm owner, or a managing partner, or even a senior attorney in the practice. They may have one story, but if you really want to know the little bits of details, the things that inform the information that you've been given and that may add up to a slightly different story, go to the people on the ground. Really makes a big difference. Also an opportunity to respect someone who really deserves respect in the position that they're in and make them feel good. Then you also have a secret alliance within the organization. If you joke around with them a little bit, it's amazing how far a little bit of kindness goes. However, this actually isn't the theme of today's episode. Today's episode, we're talking about 3 advantages you can have in being a prosperous law firm owner, ways to gain prosperity and an edge on your competitors. This is not tactical advice here. These are truly big ideas, the type of ideas that you should be able to repeat them simply over and over and over again in order to implement them, rather than needing to have a 15-point playbook. Don't get me wrong, I love a good 15-point playbook. Like many, I love tactics just as much as I love strategy, just as much as I remain in love with my principles. Tactics are very, very fun, but it helps for us to zoom out a little bit here. After having done some episodes, a little bit more in depth, it'll be interesting to go with this semi-variety show with some interesting principles and strategies that we're going to introduce. So, on to our 3 advantages. Advantage number 1 is consistency to the point of insanity. What I mean by this, and I actually recently spoke to our Genesis Mastermind group in Charleston about this, in marketing especially, but really in everything that you do, the need for consistency and carrying forward in the face of what seems to be either silence or even opposition is a massive market differentiator, or maybe not a market differentiator, that may be the wrong phrase. What we're really searching for here is an operational differentiator, and it's a personal modus operandi differentiator. So the majority of law firm owners in any given marketing strategy will end far before they ever get to the point of results. Usually one of 2 things happens. Either they get a very big hit early on and they're thrilled with it and that gets some initial energy, but they quickly fade away as they don't get the big hits over the next several weeks or several months. So they really enjoyed this rapid success. And then when the rapid success goes away, so too does their energy and willingness to continue implementing the strategy, much less tweaking the strategy to try and get it to function. The other version of it is it just doesn't do that well early on, or it's sort of middling results for a while. And a lot of folks can't really tolerate middling results for long enough for them to become great results. Let's take, for example, parts of the referral playbook that I coach on, which I'm talking about down here in Florida. If we are not willing to actually sit down and network and have the coffees and have the lunches and stay consistent with that, it's not like the first week you're going to sit down and have coffee with some miracle referral provider, although it has actually happened. Of course, the only way to get to that point of inviting that level of success, that quote unquote luck, which is when preparation meets opportunity, you only get that if you are preparing to do the work and then execute on it. But the people who stay consistent with it, those are the ones who continue to pile up valuable referral partners over time. One of the things I've seen with clients, Catalyst members, and people out there in the world, and it happens, but we need to get away from this, is when we execute on it for a while, get a couple of good referral partners and think, well, that's enough. And then over time, we start looking back on the strategy and thinking, yeah, it was good. I got a couple of decent people, but nothing major. Of course, nothing major. You did not develop a long enough relationship building system to invite the big, massive amount of luck, or really hitting that hockey stick moment where you find the referral provider who could be massive for you. You have to stay in the game. And this consistency to the point of insanity is because most people, once they get to that point where they feel like all the evidence is against them, and I should say the moment the evidence appears against them, they tuck tail and they go away. Of course, the people who, when they see the evidence slightly against them, go, I have built this based on strong principles and strategic foundations. Therefore, I will continue to pursue this, perhaps by altering my tactics. I want you to hear that breakdown again. I have pursued this based on strong principles and strategies, but perhaps I may need to change my tactics. That's a reasonable approach to take if you are building well-principled and strategically sound marketing. If everything that you're doing is about using some fun headline or TikTok format, or you decided for some reason to do the ALCS Ice Bucket Challenge, which I think we did over a decade ago, then yeah, your tactics are likely to fail. You don't really have a purpose behind them. But if you know your purpose and you are continually going forward to the point where you have to temporarily ignore what seems to be evidence against you, that is where we hit the point of success. If you have ever played a sport, whether solo sport or team sport, there comes a time where it appears like you are not going to get any better at it. But you really know that if you keep up the practice reps, you will get better at it. You are not actually at your peak with whatever you are doing. Same for marketing, same for operations. Several people at the mastermind talked about or shared examples of consistency in leading their teams. I'm not going to go into details here because that's something that is reserved for the Genesis Mastermind group, but the consistency led to the results, not the cleverness of the tactic. It was doing it over and over again that produced the outcome they really desired. In NFL football, you have to have the ability to take your losses. Like if you're an NFL quarterback, you have to forget about your interceptions, right? Because you have to go back out there and throw the ball without flinching. You have to go back out there and operate without that interception looming over you. You don't go back on the field to prove the interception wrong. You go back on the field to score a touchdown. And those are different objectives overall. If you're trying to, if you're playing to not get an interception, are you really playing to win at that point? Or are you playing to save face? Probably a huge mindset lesson in that right there, but we're not going to go in too deep on that here in this moment. Number 2 on our list of 3 advantages to achieve prosperity as a law firm owner is the maturity to know that the game of success changes as your law firm grows. The easiest way to suspend or otherwise stall your growth is to believe that the journey will stay the exact same for all of time. whether you have a $500,000 or $5 million or $10 million or $50 million law firm, if you believe the thing that you are doing today as a law firm owner is the exact same thing that you'll be doing in the future, and if you believe that the exact same strategies today will work the exact same way in the future when you are 2, 3, 10x bigger than you are today, you need to develop the maturity to understand that things will change. And you have to be the person who changes. This is why, by the way, our main program is called Catalyst, because you are the change agent. If you are not changing, then nothing changes in the law firm. But if you know that you have to embrace change, you can grow. And there is no cap on how you can grow. Now, you also need to know yourself and what you would like to do in life. And chances are part of your core is that you want to push boundaries a little bit, and you're probably comfortable with the idea of change. You just need to recognize that change is a mandatory to achieve the success. For example, if you're trying to grow your firm right now to $1 million, the main part of that journey, in my experience, is marketing. I know that there are a ton of hot takes out there about how it's all about excellent legal services, or it's about dialing in your KPIs, and those are all really important. But time and time again, when we come back to what has the greatest impact growing to $1 million, it is marketing. And you need to have the maturity at that point in time to realize I have to get serious about marketing. I have to be a student of marketing. I have to be an implementer of marketing. I have to lead my teams and my law firms' marketing efforts. But then there comes a point around, for most firms, depending on the practice area, a little bit earlier for estate planning, a little bit later for personal injury, where you have to really focus on systems. So this is usually the $1.25 million mark for personal injury law firms, a little bit earlier for estate planning and criminal defense and family law, where it's very important to bring in attorneys who have to be able to run a similar playbook to you, and you tend to have more heavy in the legal staff. That's not what we're talking about here, so I'll steer us out of that little rant that threatens to jump out of my mouth at any moment. At $1.25 million, or somewhere between about $900,000 and $1.2 million, you need to have the maturity to focus on systems. So the journey between, say, that $1 to $2 million is really a systems journey. It's how can I replicate what I am doing and offload the vast majority, or at least a significant portion of my own legal work, and systemize how it gets done to ensure it gets done at a level of quality that I have come to expect from my law firm as the primary legal services provider, but would like to continue getting for clients in my law firm, no matter who is handling the implementation. Very, very important to work on systems at that point. As you work on the systems, you then will get to a point where the next level of maturity is recognizing the value of complete mastery of your finances, really dialing in how is the money coming in, how do clients get valued based on the source by which you acquire them, really knowing your average client value, projecting revenue, developing a budget. So really once we get to, say, that $2 million mark, from there it's a finance and really talent acquisition game. And you need to mature up into those roles. You can't say that, oh, I don't actually have to learn that. Yes, you do. You are the owner of the law firm. The fun and difficult part of owning the law firm is you gaining knowledge of all of this. You do not have to become an absolute master, but you absolutely must be competent at minimum, if not eagerly learning and constantly growing your skills in these spaces. That's what we'll really focus on, is growth through each step of the journey as you mature in the journey. But you have to have that initial maturity to say, I'm going to have to change. I cannot be doing the same thing 3 years from now that I am doing today. If I'm doing the exact same thing, particularly out of choice, then there's a problem. Now look, sometimes we come on bad times. Perhaps a worldwide event happens that pauses your growth overall. So be it. We completely understand how that can happen, and you may be stuck at a plateau for a little bit. Maybe there are life circumstances that dictate it. Forgive yourself and just look to the moment when you can get past that, and perhaps have the maturity to embrace the difficulty of that moment, knowing that you can press to the other side through it. In and of itself, a very difficult thing to deal with, but one that is real and happens to law firm owners, including some who I personally know and have worked with. The third thing that we want here, your third advantage, so our first two advantages are consistency to the point of insanity. Advantage number 2 is the maturity to know the game changes as the law firm grows. And then number 3 is preemptive and boundary setting communication. It is very easy for your time to be stolen from you. Everyone wants a piece of it. Your team wants a piece of it. Clients want a piece of it. Vendors want a piece of it. Referral sources want a piece of it. Obviously, your family wants a piece of it. And at some point or another, don't you need a piece of it as well? So setting boundaries in the way that you can be communicated with and that you communicate with the world is really, really important. I've heard a lot of law firm owners talk about this. And it just comes down to not simply stating your boundaries, but actually holding them. It's very easy to say, oh, I'm going to start time blocking. It's very easy to have a calendar that has time blocks on it. It is much harder to hit one of those time blocks and say, I am going to honor this time block. I won't pretend that I am absolutely perfect at it. But I find that knowing you are imperfect and continually striving and recognizing the imperfection in order to work on delivering to yourself the gift of that time is a powerful way to operate in the world. It certainly gives you an edge up on those who are not consistent with their time management because they give up the first time that it goes wrong. Remember, consistency to the point of insanity, it certainly applies here. But the other part of the boundary setting communication is communicating to your team when you are and are not available. And then the preemptive side of communication, I've talked with so many coaching clients about this. Basically, if you're going to sit down and talk with a team member, and let's say you're going to have a difficult conversation with the team member, perhaps about their performance, it helps if at the beginning you lay down what is going to happen. Hey, Charlie, one of the things that we're going to talk about here is we're going to talk about performance expectations. And I know that that can be an uncomfortable conversation. I can understand if even me introducing this to you right now makes you feel uncomfortable. Our goal here is to figure out a best path forward and to see where I may have failed in communicating expectations to you and to see where you can find opportunities to level up and hit a level of performance that I believe you are capable of. This is preemptive communication. It is letting the person know the objective of what we are going to talk about, why it is important to talk about it, and even saying it's okay essentially for us to fail in this conversation. And actually, I'll mention that as a very direct thing. When you are early on having some of these leadership conversations, and you don't have the practice reps on them, it is a-okay to start the conversation and say, hey, we're going to have a conversation, and this isn't something that I've done a lot, but I want to be better at doing, which is talking about performance and expectations here in the law firm. And this is something I want to do with everyone. You're just one of the earlier people I'm doing this with. So can we agree that we're both just going to work our way through this in the best way possible, trusting that our collective intentions are good? That also shows respect for the emotional maturity of the person across the table. If you want people to respond well to constructive criticism, coaching, it helps if they are respected in their emotional maturity. If you don't respect them, then they're not going to hold the line on maturity. And if they're not actually mature enough to handle the conversation, maybe there's another conversation that needs to be had that is far more difficult because that person may not be able to be coached up and grow within the firm in the long run. This idea of preemptive communication, really setting the table stakes and bringing down the guard and even admitting your own faults, it just doesn't exist in many spaces, despite its tremendous value in managing and leading people. So setting boundaries and being preemptive in your communication, which to me, preemptive communication really is another form of boundary setting. It's putting up these guide rails that help us have a successful, productive communication. That can absolutely change the game for you, for your team members. This is even a powerful tool in the way you communicate with your spouse, even with your kids. And yes, I use these communication strategies with my children, my 10 and 7-year-old, and they absolutely work. They really do. They change the quality of our overall communication and allow us to have a level of depth to the way that we speak to each other, no matter who it is that I'm talking with. So these 3 advantages, again, are consistency to the point of insanity, The maturity to know the game changes as you grow, and preemptive and boundary setting communication. These are 3 advantages you can give yourself to achieve greater prosperity in your law firm. And if this is the type of thing that you would love not only to go into these principles and strategies discussions, but you would love to see some of the tactics that get laid out for you overall and how you can directly implement this, or maybe you'd like to ask a very specific question, get some feedback on some of the communication that you're doing, you should absolutely join Catalyst as soon as possible. Our Catalyst coaching program is the perfect place to start as a solo or small law firm owner who is looking for incredibly powerful coaching and a system that you can follow and implement in your practice that doesn't just teach tactics, but invites you into the principles and strategies, because we believe our responsibility is to teach you how to fish while we also hand you the fish. All right, now I have to ask myself the final question, which is, what am I reading, watching, and listening to these days? So I am reading a book called Stories Are Weapons, and it's a fascinating book about propaganda, about psyops, about how journalism has been used at times to sway public opinion, whether it's from the government, from corporations, from individuals, how stories are powerful assets in changing the world, changing opinions, etc. Just a very, very cool book that actually I have the copy of right over there behind me. Stories Are Weapons by Annalee Newitz. Stories Are Weapons by Annalee Newitz. So that is what I'm reading. What I'm watching these days is I am finally finishing up the 3rd season of Ted Lasso. I just didn't get that deep into it last time. Its tone was different from seasons 1 and 2, and I finally decided, you know what, let's go ahead and get through that. I'm also about to finish the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once. Finally getting around to that as well. Sometimes when I travel, I like to have a couple of good movies I store away on my iPad to watch while I am away. And then finally, what am I listening to? Well, recently I've been listening to the soundtrack for Dune 1 and Dune 2 as part of my writing. I know that I've mentioned that I listen to Hans Zimmer. I listen to some of the music by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, like some of the music scores that they have. But otherwise, when it comes to music overall, I've just been re-listening to my liked songs playlist on Spotify, which is a wide variety of music. I mean, truly, it is hard to pin down exactly what I listen to, other than apparently I listen to a lot of sad stories. I love a deep emotional song. What can I say? I'm a sucker, I guess, for a ballad, just who I am. Sucker for a folk ballad in particular. Yet there's also punk rock and some death metal on there. I don't know what's going to pop up on it, but I seem to like all of it. So that's what I'm reading, watching, and listening to these days. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode of They Don't Teach This in Law School.